we try to control everything. We try to control people, outcomes, events, right? And then when things don't go our way, we make ourselves miserable. But I think surrender is that you're still taking action, but you're not resisting life, you're flowing with life. Let them see the change in you. And then if they're curious, like, then you answer the questions like, how were you able to change? But the best thing, I think Ram Dass says this, the best thing I can do for you is to work on me.
Greetings all, welcome back to Living Once Twice, the place where we rewrite narratives, reinvent ourselves, and reimagine our lives. Thank you all for tuning in to today's episode. Before we dive in, please be sure to subscribe, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Also give us a follow on Instagram at Living Once Twice, where you can view more great content, including information on all of our amazing guests, including the guest that I have on today, which is Supreet. Supreet is an entrepreneur, content creator, mom, and spiritual seeker on the lifelong path of self-discovery and personal development. As host of the YouTube channel Grow with Supreet and podcast Unconditional Joy, Supreet inspires her audience to find the joy within through practicing spirituality, inner work, and self-compassion. Supreet, welcome back to the show. How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you, Justin?
All is going good. I'm so happy we had a couple of minutes to just kind of like catch up briefly, but all is well. And like I told you, I'm really, really looking forward to our conversation. Just for the audience, Supreet may sound familiar, and if that's the case, that's true because Supreet was a guest on season 5, episode 45. It's never too late to begin again. And during that time, we got to talk about your journey and career transition. But I'm really excited because over the last couple of years, we've still been able to stay in touch, and I've gotten to just watch your journey unfold and stay tuned to that. And I'm really excited because I think the audience is going to take so much away from you. Just have a very transparent and honest way to take us along your spiritual path, including the hurdles along the way. So I just love your transparency and your honesty because I feel like your audience really does get to benefit from that.
Thank you.
So, Supreet, there are a lot of places that I want to go today. I want to talk about navigating one's own spiritual awakening. I also want to talk about the aspect of learning how to embrace surrender in our path to joy and to peace, as well as how can we cultivate more of a sense of being present with the experience. But where I want to start, as this season is all about transformation, you've kind of undergone a transformation yourself where before when we met, you were YouTube and doing that really, really active. And then you've launched your own podcast. So just wondering if you could just take our audience through, give us a little bit of your background, but then also share with us more about the story behind your transformation from YouTuber to now podcaster.
For sure. So I did YouTube roughly from 2019 to 2024, so about 5 years. And the reason I started that was that I was in this path of personal growth and I was just very, very keen to share whatever I was learning with anybody who wants to listen to me. And I just got so much joy by sharing whatever I'm learning. So any book that I read that I thought was amazing, I would make like a book review or book summary video. And yeah, I just basically was following my heart. And then what happened is that the reason I quit YouTube in 2024 is that somewhere along the line during those 5 years, I kind of became a prisoner to the YouTube algorithm where I started focusing on how do I make my titles catchy and my thumbnails clickable and doing all that stuff, which is a part of the game. You have to do that because what's the point of, creating amazing content when nobody's clicking on it, right? So you have to figure out both parts of the game. And content creation is one piece of it. And the other piece is how to get eyeballs on it, right? But then towards the end of those 5 years, I just felt like I said before, that I'm becoming a prisoner to the algorithm and the joy, just the pure joy of sharing what I want to share without focusing too much of my brain on titles and thumbnails and now I have to promote my videos and all that. Yeah, so the joy became less and I just felt like I need to stop doing that because I wanted to follow my heart and not my head. My head would say that, hey, you've built this audience of almost 10,000 subscribers. It would be foolish to stop now. But my heart was like, I'm not feeling the joy anymore. So I stopped. So then for about a year, I took a break. And then that urge to share started growing again. And it started with a whisper, and then it was louder and louder until I had to do something. But I was very sure that I do not want to again become a prisoner to the algorithm. So I thought I'll do something, start from scratch. And this time with a podcast, my intention was to try easy, not try hard. And what I mean by that is that I stopped doing a lot of the things that I used to do to please the algorithm. So I would write scripts. I would spend hours writing and editing scripts. And then while shooting, I would do, like, if I fumbled on a sentence, I would do retakes maybe 3 times, 4 times. And I basically stopped obsessing with perfection. And I thought this podcast is going to be more like a conversation. So I do not write scripts anymore for my podcast episodes. I just have like a rough idea in my mind, and then I try to act like I'm having a conversation with a friend about this topic. What would I say? So it's very raw, unscripted, and natural, and nowhere near perfect. And that has been a growth area for me as well, because I'm a perfectionist. So letting go of perfection has been a part of my journey. And yeah, so I'm trying to go with the flow, and I'm trying not to try too hard, and hence the switch from YouTube to podcast, because it allows me to not get too attached to the numbers, the metrics. And it still does, but my intention is to keep on reminding myself that, this is for the joy, this is for getting out what wants to be said through me. It's not about me getting validation, it's not about me getting views and all that stuff. So I hope that answers your question.
No, it really does. And it just sparks so much curiosity that I want to go deeper into, Supreet. And as you kind of led us through this different journey of, you built up this audience with your YouTube channel, and it was really incredible, because I think that's how I met you, was through one of your book reviews. And so, but you found it's really interesting that you talked about like getting caught and lost in the metrics of it all. And you go into content creating with such a passion to share yourself and to be creative, but then that's starting to lose its own luster. And I think this maybe is part of the journey of so many creators, where you can't help but get caught up in the metrics, what other people are doing, the algorithms. But as that passion kind of was wearing, and you took a break. I'm wondering though, with that break part, how scary was that for you? Because in my mind, I'm thinking as a content creator, were you worried like, hey, will I lose my audience? Will I lose my momentum? Will I ever go back? Because I could see many creators maybe being on that journey of maybe some sort of creative burnout, where they're finding their passion is more going left, and it's becoming work versus it being something that they're doing out of joy. So just curious of like what narratives or inner dialogue was going on when you were deciding to take that break or going through that break. Like, did you have any of those worries that came up?
Not really, because I have the luxury that I'm not the breadwinner in our house. My husband is. So, had my income depended solely on my content creation, then I would have absolutely had a lot of those thoughts. Yes, I was making some money. I am making some money from YouTube, but it's not a lot. And I don't have that pressure of being the breadwinner of the house. So that did not affect me. And had that been the case, then things may have gone a different way. So I'm very grateful for having that privilege that I had. And one thing I forgot to mention, you used the word creative burnout. I think for me, it was less burnout and more also, like, in addition to what I said in the answer to your first question, it was also loneliness. Being a content creator can feel very lonely, because yes, you get some engagement through comments and stuff, but at times you feel like, because it's all online, it's not in person, right? I think as a human, we do desire in person connections. So, in that 1 year, when I took time off, I focused on building in person connections with people who are on a similar path, personal growth, spiritual growth. And that was my focus, because I felt like, yes, you can have like 10,000 people following you, but it can still feel pretty lonely.
Wow. I think that's a gem. That's an insight right there, because for many folks, like that is their way of connection now, is social media, is social engagement. And to hear you say like, yeah, you could have an audience of thousands of people but still feel lonely. So nothing, AI can't replace that type of in-person connection for many of us. I think that's like something that's gonna like ring true and resonate with a lot of people. So I want to talk more about that year because, all right, so you're taking a break from the YouTubing. How else are you feeding yourself spiritually? Because you talked about the in-person connections. Were there certain books or other things that you were tapping into that was also kind of a part of your journey over that course of that year?
Yes. I took a deep dive into Michael Singer's work. I read, I think, three of his books: Surrender Experiment, The Untethered Soul a Second Time, and Living Untethered. And then I found his talks online. He has a podcast. So I truly began to understand the concept of surrender through Michael Singer's book, The Surrender Experiment. And it was like a big aha moment for me where I finally understood what this surrender thing is that all these other spiritual teachers have talked about. And then during that 1 year, it was all about learning and then trying to begin to apply it in my own life.
So this is interesting, the concept of surrender, and hearing you talk about that, because I think it's one of those misunderstood concepts. And so want to definitely hear your take on it, because I can hear for some people they say, "Wait, you learned surrender?" But then for many of us, when we hear the word surrender, we could think that it means like giving up or being passive. So did your time getting to dive into Michael Singer's work, did it redefine your understanding of surrender? Like, what did it look like to start, and what does it look like now?
Absolutely. So, like most people, I also thought surrender means giving up and, I'm just going to take no action and just let life happen, right? And be passive, be a passive watcher. But from his book, which is the story of his own life, of how he practiced surrender, I got a very practical example of what surrender looks like. So, it just means not resisting life. So, we try to control everything. We try to control people, outcomes, events, right? And then when things don't go our way, we make ourselves miserable. But I think surrender is that you're still taking action, but you're not resisting life, you're flowing with life. So, as an analogy, so let's say if a river is flowing, and I decide, or my ego decides, that I want to swim in the upstream direction, right? Because that's just what I decided, and I'm going to struggle and I'm going to, tire myself out. I'm going to get frustrated because I'm going nowhere because I'm going against the river. If, however, I surrender to the flow of the river, I realize that, look, this is the way the river is going. How about I swim in that direction? I'm going to go from one place to the next much faster. It's going to be much easier. There's not going to be a lot of effort because I surrendered to the flow of river. And so that's what surrender to me means now.
Yeah, and what I'm also hearing and seeing, Supreet, is kind of this alignment as you're using that analogy of fighting against the current, but instead just kind of going with it and going with that flow, as it relates back to what you mentioned earlier of your journey with YouTube. And then you kind of just, instead of, you could have tried to like willpower, white knuckle it through because you've built up this audience and showing up for people and all of the other aspects. But instead, whether you knew it or not, you were practicing a form of surrender, it sounds like. And then from there, it led you into developing your own podcast and Unconditional Joy. And so I guess what I wanted to learn more is just about the name behind your podcast. Like, how did that end up being what you landed with? Is it anything you want to share about just the story behind the name?
Yeah, absolutely. It is definitely inspired by Michael Singer's teachings. So before, I used to think, and I think most people think this way, that I will feel joy when I achieve this, or when my loved ones, act like this, or this happens in my life, or the traffic goes my way, the weather goes my way, right? So our joy is conditional to all these things happening, that our ego has decided that this is what I want, right? But now my mission in life, and that's why I named my podcast this, is Unconditional Joy, which is I want to be able to feel joy inside me, joy and peace, irrespective of what is happening outside, irrespective of what the government is doing, what my loved ones are doing, what the weather is doing, the traffic, anything. I want to be able to cultivate that peace and that centeredness, that I am able to have unconditional joy.
I'm excited to dive into this some more because I love that. that part you were saying of like, we will always put this kind of caveat on when we'll feel joy, right? Like, yeah, when we get the degree, when we get the job, the relationship, whatever it might be. And so it's always kind of out of this place outside of us. But hearing you talk about how you took back your power and your ability to cultivate joy for yourself and really awakening to that, to me, that's like a next level like realization. And so what I could hear people saying is like, as you go through this awakening process and you realize that your joy is not conditional to what, say, the government's doing or what the people around you are doing or your boss, you maybe start to question a lot of different things. You do kind of an audit of a lot of things that maybe once upon a time you thought were bringing you joy and you realize there aren't. And so there's a lot of questions that could come up, confusion that could come up. And I appreciate in your podcast, you talk about how you normalize that it's okay to feel confused. You may feel some other intense emotions coming up. So I guess what would you say, or what was it like for you, the intense dialogue or even sense of confusion that might have started to come up for you as you're starting to awaken more that like, oh no, you can cultivate your own sense of joy. It's not necessarily like up to these forces outside of you.
Yes, I absolutely encountered a lot of confusion, and not just confusion, but also resistance. When I would hear Michael Singer say all these things about, your natural state of mind is of ecstasy, and it's because we store all these blockages and patterns in us that we're not able to feel joy all the time. Like, I had so much resistance because I was thinking, yeah, easy for you to say because you've meditated for like years in the woods and this and that, but me in my current life, I don't think that's true for me, right? But then there's two ways to deal with confusion, and this is what I did. First is to not resist confusion itself, because when you're on the path of surrender, it's a path of stop resisting life, right? So if life is bringing me confusion, instead of resisting it, I can just embrace it as part of the process, because it's confusion that brings clarity. It's confusion that brings aha moments. And I love having these aha moments. And I wouldn't have them if I wasn't confused before, right? And the next thing is just to have patience, because if I'm confused about some spiritual concept or my own spiritual journey where I'm feeling like I'm not making progress fast enough or something, I just have to be patient, because the more I do this work, the more I am trusting the universe and divine timing. So if I'm supposed to get something, I will get it at the right perfect time for me. So I just need to have patience. And then one last thing that helped me with confusion with spiritual concepts is I am coming from an engineering background, scientific background. I'm a very much analytical person who's in her head and tries to figure everything out in her head, right? And I tried to do the same thing with spiritual concepts. And I realized, and this is probably one of the biggest mistakes I made in my spiritual growth journey, is that you can't get all these concepts at the level of the mind. You have to go from mind into the body, and you have to actually practice. So you have to, whatever works for you, meditation, journaling, breath work, right? So when I did these practices more and more, and I was more in my body and less in my mind, I started to have revelations like, oh, this is what Michael Singer meant. Because I couldn't, just by reading and listening, I could not break through with some concepts, but it's only by doing the work and doing the practice, sitting with myself, sitting in silence, that some concepts started making sense.
These are some very powerful reframes, Supreet, and this is why I'm just so excited to have you here and always just talk to you and learn from you. Hearing you say, I wrote this down, confusion brings clarity. Like you never hear anyone think of confusion actually can work for you in a way. And you kind of offer this reframe that like, no, it's okay because as you work through it, as you kind of sit with it, those clouds will dissipate and clarity will come. And I also wanted to uplift what you were just talking about, the whole aspect of mind body connection, because as some of this is going on, one of the things I've heard you say is you will feel a lot physically as well, and you do have to get out of your head. And I want to go to this quote that I heard you say, when it comes to connecting to our minds and our bodies is the longest journey is the 18 inches from your head into your heart. And for some of us, a part of this whole getting back to our natural state is we've gotten so far from being able to like feel our feels. And it's really interesting that we sometimes have to relearn how to do that again. And you've offered a couple of different practices that I didn't know if you wanted to share more about, of like for those of us who've gotten away from our feelings and our ability to feel our feels or sit with our uncomfortable emotions, how do we like recultivate that muscle again? And you shared a couple of things like meditation and stillness, but anything more you want to share about how can folks relearn to feel their feels again so they can reconnect to their mind, their body, their intuition?
Yeah, for sure. First of all, that quote, 18 inches from the head to the heart, is not mine. I've heard it. I'm not sure what the source is, but yeah, just wanted to point out
Well,
it's
we're
not
giving you
my
credit
quote.
on this podcast word.
Yeah, and secondly, I think we just live in a world where we are bombarded with inputs all the time, right? There's our phone, there's so many notifications, there's so many devices in our house that when we are just having input, input, input all the time, we become disconnected with our own self. So I think to feel our feelings, to do this inner healing, to do this spiritual growth work, we need to have, in the beginning it can start with just like 5 minutes of time with ourselves, and it can be whatever works for anybody, right? Maybe go for a walk without any phone, or meditate if that works for you. For some people, journaling, breath work, whatever appeals to you, just start with something. And the more we spend time with ourselves doing any of these things and away from all the inputs, away from all the distractions, then we begin to not just increase our self-awareness but also feel those feelings that you're talking about, because we're so used to any small discomfort, we just pick up our phone and start scrolling or eating food or alcohol or something like that because it's uncomfortable, and we just want to nip that uncomfort discomfort in the bud and just not even bear it for a few seconds, right? So as a result, sometimes we don't even know that we have this, sorrow, anger, frustration, all these feelings inside us, because we don't even give them a chance to come out, because the minute they arise, we numb ourselves or distract ourselves. So I think in the spiritual growth journey, what can sometimes happen is, because we begin to sit in silence with ourselves and spend more time with ourselves, all these feelings that we have buried inside us will start to come out. And as a result, that can feel discouraging, because I might think that, oh, meditation is just making me sad and anxious and upset, right? So I might want to stop meditating just for that reason. But it's like, just how they say you can't just like shove something under the carpet and expect that it's gone. It's still there. So we have to be able to sit with that discomfort and let these feelings arise. And I have gone through so many tears, so many frustration, because I did the same thing. I didn't let myself feel these feelings before, but now that I'm letting them come out, and it's like Pandora's box, right? It's like just the floodgates are open, and now these things will come up because they want to get released. These are things that we have buried down from our childhood, right? And we have to be willing to face the discomfort, because that's the only way to get rid of them permanently, because they're not going away, they're going to keep coming up.
Yeah, no, this is spot on what you're saying, and I love this aspect of trying to encourage people to not distract themselves, to embrace their feelings, because I think too what happens in our lives, like none of us are exempt from this, but like life is going to happen whether it's going to come in the aspect of career, the area of family. We talked a little bit earlier about just being a content creator. Like you're going to have some of these experiences that maybe force you to kind of halt, and you have an opportunity to either keep going, distract yourself, try to work it through, or stop resisting what's going on in life and embrace whatever this gem of life is trying to like teach you in this moment. And hearing your story, and for someone like yourself, who I don't know if you would say like, I don't know if we ever get over the storm or over the hill, but like, you get to a certain part where you can then start to look back and be like, oh, okay, I had to go through that for this reason. And like you mentioned, you had to go through the confusion to get to the clarity. it's great for you to then offer us like ways that we could sit with it and understand like these are all healthy things that are coming out of it, and they're gonna serve us. One aspect I wanted to talk about of okay, some of the like impacts of it. Like we heard how you pivoted to creating a podcast, but also curious like did your spiritual journey also impact like relationships around you as you're evolving into the new version of you and your new definition of joy? Like how did that impact any of like the relationships around you?
100%. It affected my relationships in a very positive way. So, surrender is accepting things as they are, right? So, instead of like, let's say, trying to change my husband or change my kids to be the way my ego wants them to be, right? I'm learning, and this is a process. This is not easy. It's easier said than done. But we can start with small things and then progress to bigger and bigger things. So, accepting the way they are, and I find like if I, let's say, get angry at my kid, and sometimes I'll yell at them because the anger takes over, but I feel that it lasts for a shorter time and I'm able to quickly get back to center and then even apologize. So that all is making my relationships better. And the biggest shift I would say has been in my relationship with my mom. So this has taken me a while, but I would say over the last maybe 7 or 8 years, I have gone from being a victim of my childhood and blaming my mom and having anger, resentment, and sometimes even hatred. I have gone from that to forgiving her slowly, slowly. And today I'm very happy to say that I think I've forgiven her completely, 100%. And now I have compassion because I've just done so much work on myself. I have understood how the mind works, how the ego works, and how psychology works. So I just know that she did the best she could with her own blockages and patterns that she had from her childhood. So, yeah, before it was hard for me to have that love and compassion. But I think it's because of doing all this work, the emotional healing, the inner work, spiritual growth, that compassion becomes easy for others, for your loved ones, as well as for yourself. It's it goes hand in hand.
And thank you for sharing that, because as you talked about your journey of the benefits for you, but then also there was this kind of outward effect that it then begins to have on like your relationships and how your perception of them, your perspective on them can also change. And you touched on several different ones from folks that many people can resonate with, whether it be kids, whether it be their partner, whether it be our parents as well in our childhood. And it's really encouraging for you to talk about too this area of forgiveness, because I've heard forgiveness, it's something where it's a mix of gratitude but then also compassion in us, because we can't change the past happened, but so many of us, as we're probably going through that journey, we like, oh wow, I came out the way I came out to because of my childhood or because my mom, my dad didn't do this for me. But then you talk about your hero's journey of reclaiming kind of that for yourself, and then being able to look at your own parent from a place of compassion and understanding like, hey, they were just doing the best that they could with what they had at that time. The area that I wanted to ask you about with the relationships is because you talk about this positive impact that it's had on you towards others, but one can't help themselves to be like, well, wait, I've gained all this. It would be wonderful if my friends, my family could kind of get on a similar path, because I know the benefits that are on the other side. And you could maybe pass to them an article or tell them to take a look or try this podcast out. But many of us know sometimes that olive branch doesn't get received in the best way. So what is that also like, or what would you offer to someone who's like, who really feels inspired to want to share their journey and get their friends, their family, their loved ones on the side, but they're meeting some resistance. They're meeting some resistance where like some people are like, I don't know. I don't know if that's for me. Like, what would you offer to someone in navigating that?
Yeah, I tried that myself. Like, once I started feeling the benefits of doing this work, I wanted my mom, my sister, my husband, everybody, you guys should read this book and you should listen to this podcast, right? But I learned by experience that it does not work. And so I started a podcast instead so I can talk to people who will listen to me. I would just say that you cannot force anybody on this path. yes, you can perhaps plant seeds and maybe, you know, once in a while mention a resource that you think might benefit from them. But yeah, I can tell you that it can work, but the best way is to work on yourself and be the role model, be the example, let them see the change in you. And then if they're curious, like, then you answer the questions like, how were you able to change? But the best thing, I think Ram Dass says this, the best thing I can do for you is to work on me. So, yeah, that has been my experience. That's 100% true. And I also want to say that there is an element of divine grace that, unless somebody has been graced with that curiosity or perhaps that pain to go on the spiritual path, you can't convince them to go on it. It has to come from inside. And I think divine grace is an aspect of that. So there's surrender here too, right? Surrender to the divine timing, and also surrender to the divine will that, you know, when it's meant to happen for this person, my loved one, it will happen at the perfect time for them when they are ready, not because I'm lecturing them. And also that it may not happen in this lifetime. So trusting divine will over my will, which wants everything to happen today, right now.
I like that, and then I want to highlight that part of. Do you say it's divine will, where it's pretty much, let's see here, like people, like we can't impose change on folks. And I think this happens in a lot of spaces, in like addiction spaces, and my own 12-step recovery, where it's like, no, you can want the best for your loved one to change, but they have, like, I agree with you, they have to want it themselves. And it's okay, not everyone is going to be there when we want them to be there. They're on their own path. And I also love the aspect of like, hey, maybe it won't be this lifetime. We could hope by role modeling it, showing them how we take care of ourselves, that has some sort of impact or influence on them. But at the end of the day, like, it does have to come from within them. And hopefully, like, that's an aspect of surrender too, where people learn to like let go of resisting that. And you never know, someone where they are today, where they may be 3, 4, 5 years ago or years from now, maybe in a totally different place. But this is
Right.
also, I feel like, a part of that practice of surrender.
Yeah. And so, as you can tell, Justin, surrender has been kind of the underlying theme in pretty much everything, right? So, even before, when we talked about emotions and feeling our feelings, so what we do is, like, what I'm suggesting to do is to surrender to that difficult emotion, to say, you know what? Yes, it hurts. It really hurts, but I'm going to let it hurt me. I'm going to
Mm.
let it pass through me. So, there's surrender to that difficult emotion as well.
So one of the difficult areas of surrender that I wanted to hear from your thoughts on is with respect to parenting. I finally am in the club, and so I've been listening to your parenting content, and one of the things I appreciate that you do talk about is like, hey, we can borrow from surrender when it comes to aspects of parenting as well, because we know for many of us, well, really for all of us, we want what's best for our kids. We don't want to impose or cause any pain or trauma on them. And I've also heard you share that, but we don't want to overdo parenting, because we could end up, the quote from you was, preparing them for the road. No, preparing the road for them instead of preparing them for the road. So I would love to hear you just talk about, like, in what ways have your journey of surrender influenced you as a parent? Like, what can we all learn and take from that?
I will be honest that out of all the areas of my life where I'm practicing surrender, parenting I find to be the hardest to do. It's because as a parent, I feel responsible in shaping who my kids become, shaping their future. And so it's really hard to give up control in molding them a certain way. So I'm not able to do it perfectly. I'm trying. This is a practice area for me. For example, if so my son is not into sports, right? So my ego would be like, oh, he should be into sports because he needs it for his physical fitness. It might help him in his university applications 3 4 years from now. And I have to resist the urge because he's a teenager now, right? So I have to surrender and let him be his own person. And yes, I can once in a while guide him, right? Maybe recommend, hey, why don't you try basketball? Why don't you try badminton, right? But if, yeah, so it's really hard to balance that. So I'm trying to practice surrender there. And also, like with his grades, and now that, university, he's in grade 10. So university would be about 3 years from now. And I'm also even trying to surrender to the fact that he may not go to university, and that's okay. This is all my ego making up stories, right? That to be successful, you have to go to university, and then so on, right? So that's where I'm practicing surrender. I am kind of reminding myself, that there are bigger things to teach him, and hopefully I am already teaching him those things by being a good role model, like having a growth mindset, doing the spiritual growth work, sitting with your feelings. So I feel like I'm teaching those to my kids, and perhaps these are much more important than getting good grades, getting sports trophies, and making it to university.
Oh, thanks for just kind of take us on that journey, Supreet, of like what it's been like. And of course, it's, I think I've heard you say this, progress, not perfection in terms of every arena in our lives, including the parenting arena. But just hearing you kind of just talk about how, like, yeah, some of those ego narratives that we might have on our kids, or just some of the things that may have been passed along to us, or we might be seeing other parents do, like we can kind of take a breather and kind of think about what's in our kids' best interest, and just knowing that like they'll figure that out. We could be kind of invisible guardrails here and there to support them, but we don't necessarily need to plan out every kind of like aspect of their lives.
Yeah.
And I can hear people saying as we're having this conversation, Supreme, of like, okay, Supreme and Justin, you're asking me to surrender. You're asking me to feel my feels. You're asking me to welcome confusion. All of these things can feel like work. But I also heard you talk about like, and this goes to your podcast, we could still find like joy and fun in this. So anything you'd like to just mention about like how, as someone does go through this awakening spiritual transformation journey, how they can't forget to have some like fun with it too, and like not lose sight of that.
Yes. A lot of ancient scriptures say that, this life, this is Maya, this is illusion, it's a game. So when I find myself getting too serious about this, and this is the ego, right? If you start going on the path of spiritual growth, it can take that very seriously too. And then judge that, oh, I should have been above this or above that by now, or how come I yelled at my kid, I let my anger get the best of me. By now, I, having been reading all these books and listening to these spiritual podcasts, I should not have acted like that. I should have been more calm and peaceful. So, but that's all the ego. Ego is so tricky. It just gets in anywhere and everywhere. So, what brings lightness to me when I forget all that and become too serious about things is to remember that life is like a video game, and I have to play it sincerely, but not seriously. So, video game doesn't mean that I'm not going to do anything because nothing matters anyway. So, why bother trying? I'm still going to play it for the joy of playing it. I'm going to try my hardest. And right now, the game that I'm enjoying the most playing with myself is the game of practicing surrender, practicing unconditional joy. And sometimes, I will be honest, sometimes I go through phases where I will be sad for days, and then I will question if this is even working. Why am I even doing this? But then I will move out of that phase, and then it's just like seasons, right? They come and go. So even when you're doing the spiritual work, do not get discouraged when you feel like nothing is working. And it's just emotions, right? It's sometimes maybe just chemicals in our brain trying to convince us that everything is wrong, nothing is right in my life. But just know that these are just phases, they will come and go. And yeah, remembering that it's a video game. And also, one thing that really helps when we feel discouraged on the spiritual path is to, so when something happens, for example, okay, I'll give you a little story. I recently, a few months ago, I made a small traffic violation, and I got honked at, right? And I was so surprised by how within 30 seconds I was completely over it and I was calm. I even laughed at myself, like, oops, what did I do? But in the past, Justin, this sort of stuff would like play in my mind on loop for like half a day or maybe a full day, right? And I would just like try to replay that scenario, that traffic incident in my head, and I would just keep on like being super critical, like, why didn't I do this, or why was I, distracted, why did I not, like, I would take this, something like this, very seriously. And then when it happened to me recently a few months ago, I credit all that to the spiritual work. That just means I'm changing, I'm rewiring my brain, I'm things are moving, things are progressing, because this thing in the past kept me upset and angry at myself for at least half a day, and now within 30 seconds I was able to laugh at my mistake. So find little examples of where your past self would have reacted in a different way, and you see your present self handling the same situation much more calmly and perhaps with some humor. So finding these stories and really like congratulating yourself on these small wins and sometimes big wins really helps to stay committed to this path of growth and healing.
No, that's that ability to hear you talk about just being able to like let go, not judge yourself, not go back to ruminating on it and just kind of talking about your evolution there. To me, that's just so encouraging for folks to know like, yes, if you get on this path and you, as we're talking about the whether it's the feeling the feelings, navigating the confusion, like all these things are really gonna like serve you when you look back 12 months ago from who you were before, just kind of seeing that growth and not becoming who you like were. I always feel like underneath all that rubble that we would talk about, like the childhood traumas, the passion, the worries about the perception from the outside world, is the real us. But we got to go through some of this work, and some of that rubble is the crying, it's the journaling, it's the journeys of forgiveness to get to that. But before we go into the each one teach one thing I'm curious to hear you talk about is, because you've talked about the work of others and books that you've read, can anyone ever overdo spiritual work where they feel like they've got to go to every conference, they've got to meditate 7 days a week? Like, is there anything to be said about like this in moderation or overdoing it that you would like to just offer to the audience?
Absolutely, been there, done that. Yeah, I have done all the, going on retreats and reading one spiritual book after the other and watching like videos on YouTube from different spiritual teachers. And I think I'll go back to that. This was me trying to solve all things on the level of the mind, like one more book, one more podcast, that's going to help me grow. But that wasn't the case. It was actually just doing the work by myself. And we have our own inner wisdom. The answers actually come from within us. And I feel that even when reading a spiritual book or listening to a podcast, when I have those aha moments, when I really resonate with the truth of something, I have this belief that it is not because that spiritual teacher said that. I feel that it is because a part of me already knew that truth, but just hearing it from somebody helped me remember that truth that was already in me. So I think we are our own best gurus. So instead of like overdoing it with the external sources like retreats, books, podcasts, seminars, those are good. Those are also very much needed. I'm not saying don't do those. I did those and I got so much growth, but there has to be a balance. And I think we are our own best guru, and consuming content cannot replace doing the work. And that's a mistake I've also done, where I was so resistant to meditation because it's uncomfortable, right? Because, like I said, all those buried feelings will start coming up when you close your eyes and sit down. So my ego would trick myself into believing that, how about I just listen to a Michael Singer podcast instead of meditation? Because it's kind of the same thing. But it's not, because that's just input, external input, and that does not replace doing the work. And I have talked about the discomfort when you do this, but I will say, with from my personal experience, that all that discomfort is so worth doing it. Like the story I shared with the traffic violation, in other situations, like, forgiving my mom, my other relationships getting better, seeing how I react differently now than in the past, all those reassure me so much to want to continue this work and want to continue to go through the discomfort, because it is so worth it.
Oh no, right on. And Supreet, this is why you are such a powerhouse. And folks, again, I'll share Supreet's handles and her podcast page because this is like what you discussed is the importance of the inner work. There's no shortcuts to it. The only way through is through. But then you just mentioning here that like this is a line, like we all have our own inner wisdom. We're all our own spiritual guru. And so a part of this process is us getting reconnected to that. Like we have an intuition for a reason. And we've maybe lost contact with it, or maybe we've diminished our trust in ourselves. But as you've led us through in this conversation, all that could be like rebuilt back up again if we just do the work.
100%.
So, Supreet, next up is our each one teach one question. So, I have a couple of questions for you. So, are you ready for our first one?
Sure.
So, I know we were just talking about how like folks don't need to tap in every book, podcast, etc. However, that is actually the first question. So, is there one book, one podcast, one resource that you would recommend that's been a game changer in this season of your journey?
Sure. I'll mention my most recent book that I think has changed my life and is going to change my life. That's Byron Katie's book called Loving What Is.
Good to know. And do you mind sharing a little bit? Kind of, that's a new one to me.
So she teaches a practical way of not resisting life. I feel like I've learned a lot from Michael Singer, but he's more focused on the what and how. And what she offers is a practical way, which she calls the work or the inquiry, where we evaluate our own stressful thoughts and then find freedom from them by doing the work. And in the book Loving What Is, why I loved it is there's so many examples of different people doing the inquiry facilitated by Byron Katie, and how they go from being like really miserable because of a stressful thought to towards the end finding a lot of freedom and even gratitude for the same thing towards the end of the talk with her.
Hmm. Well, thanks for sharing that context. No, that's a good one. So that's that's an awesome one recommendation. The next one is if you could develop any law or policy that everyone would need to abide by, what would that be?
Everyone has to hug at least one person every day. It can be the people you live with. If you live by yourself, then find a neighbor, find a stranger, but you have to hug at least one person every day. And the reason I say that is because, we live in this online world, but the human to human interaction, the oxytocin that you get by just giving a hug, I feel like it has the potential to cure loneliness and anxiety and depression. Just one hug a day.
I'm glad you spoke on that because one of the things I've learned being a parent is the how like when a baby's born, they always talk about skin to skin, and many of us, like, to your point, get away from like how important that type of physical touch can be for all of us, reassuring, security, safety, all just what it does. So thanks for I like that one.
Yeah. And the
Um,
person you hug might be needing it more than you do.
mm,
It's not just selfish,
mm,
like it's a service as well.
yeah, yeah, that's a good one, Preet. So the next one is, what's one piece of advice that you would have offered to your 20-year-old self?
Don't take life too seriously. But okay, I say this, but I also think that maybe at 20, I wasn't ready to hear that. So maybe I would give no advice, actually. I changed my
Ah,
answer. I would give no advice because I think everything works out perfectly. And again, this comes from my trust in the way universe works, my trust in divine timing. I feel like I had to go through all my life experiences to be who I am today. So maybe I wouldn't change anything.
oh, that's good. That's a good one. That's a good response to that. And then the final question is, since this season's all about personal transformation and letting go, what's one closing thought that you'd like to leave listeners with in terms of embracing surrender on their path of transformation?
Hmm. I feel like I've already shared so many thoughts on surrender. I don't have much more to add, but don't take surrender too seriously, maybe.
Cool. Okay, we'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
So, Supreet, what's next for you, and where can people go to find more about you, your offerings, the podcast?
Sure. So my podcast is on YouTube. It's called Unconditional Joy, and it's also on Apple, Amazon Music. It's on four others. I can't remember, but it's on all the major podcast platforms, iHeartRadio. And then my YouTube channel has all my videos from 2019 to 2024. The YouTube channel is called Grow with Supreet, and it has a lot of personal growth stuff, a lot of personal growth book summaries, book reviews, some parenting stuff, some spiritual stuff. Yeah, so those two would be the places to find more content from me.
Awesome. Well, we'll be sure to include all of that in the show notes. Supreet, again, I just want to thank you for your time, for your insight, just taking us on such an incredible journey through this conversation of embracing the path of our transformation, embracing surrender, just rewriting that whole narrative on it, and all the just various gems. I'm really, really appreciative of you, like I've said, through hopefully throughout, of just your friendship and this being connected to you, and just can't continue to wait to just continue to listen to more of your insights on your podcast, and see what else kind of comes out of it.
Yeah, thank you so much for your kind words. And likewise, I'm happy to have a fellow spiritual growth person walking the path with me. And yeah, it's awesome to talk about these topics. These are my favorite topics to talk about.
Yeah. So, folks, that is it for today's show. I'd like to thank you all for your presence and tuning in today. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to show your support by sharing the Living Ones podcast on Instagram, LinkedIn, leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and also commenting on the YouTube channel. Also, be sure to give us a follow on Instagram at Living Ones Choice for more content updates. Reaching out to you all through the time and the space that separates us to say, remember, your dream life is waiting for you. It's time to go for it. You deserve it. Catch you later on Living Once Twice.